Tale Podcast, how stories shape and change our lives. Thank you for joining us on this third and final episode in conversation with my friend Dr. Amy Ferrell, as together we have been exploring some of the nature of the divine feminine and divine masculine archetypes in storytelling and in life. Please enjoy our continued exploration together. Hello and welcome back, my friend Amy Ferrell. This is our third installation of what is turning out to be a very wonderful, interesting, and epic conversation about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And as we said in the beginning, we can't talk about the divine masculine or the divine feminine really without talking about the backdrop of patriarchy, which is where we started getting into. So
yes, right. Yes. And so we were talking about kind of the perhaps some origins of patriarchy, at least how I understand them and how I see them, right, as really kind of originating with I'll be as bold to say originating with the birth of human consciousness to become aware of our own mortality.
Yeah, I think that's a fair and probably very accurate statement.
And of course, it's, it has its own instantiations, as that evolve and throughout time. And we're talking, thousands and thousands of years of this, right? But when we first started to sort of perceive our own death as imminent or as inevitable, rather than just sort of living it in sort of our own animal instincts, survival instincts, where, of course, like we know death exists because we can see our friend who died, right? But when we became able to see that that's going to be us someday, and that juxtaposition,
cognizance together and start to make sense out of our own experiences.
Yes, right. And that was almost like an initial sort of opposition, order out of chaos that we were making of life and death, that we're going to experience both, that life is also sort of like the what we're aware of, like our conscious awareness, and death symbolizes what's unknown to us and what we're unaware of, and the unconscious and the void and the feminine and all those things, right? Yes. And so we began to then prepare for our survival or take measures to control. And, we developed this complex thinking where of foresight and cause and effect. And, we can create the scientific method and we can learn what predicts what, and we can learn how to keep ourselves safe, and we can create these towns and these settlements and these farms, and we can learn how to, prolong our lives, and we can learn how to see ourselves as living beyond, just this experience in our offspring, in our fame, in our words, and in our language. We can feel like life is going to go on after we die.
I'm going to make a mark.
Yes.
How still lives or exists beyond my own death, my contribution to the world, whatever. We use a lot of those words.
Yes, like legacy.
Legacy, yes.
Legacy was essentially how the ancients thought of immortality.
Yes.
And so so that sort of human instinct to survive and to thrive and to be able to create our own safety and to stay put coincided with, we then didn't really learn or experience how to move and be in movement and accept change and accept death and grow. Yeah. And so we sort of lost that when we became agrarian and became really fixated on how we can avoid or evade our death, which of course we did.
Cartesian view of the universe as a machine or a clock. right?
Yeah.
Nothing's supposed to, there's things that are moving and working, but they're not going anywhere. They're supposed to stay put, right?
Right.
And
Right.
if one part is not staying put or doing its job, it's malfunctioning,
Right. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
The system.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Mhm.
created these systems and these institutions that, we imagine will exist in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Right. And
Right.
so some
Mhm.
sort of last, I think, I'm not an evolutionary psychologist, but it seems like we lost the ability to move when we shifted as a species and to accept death. And so I think where we left off the last episode, I was saying like essentially the patriarchy on a collective psyche,
Yeah.
like archetypal level, is really fear of death.
Fear of death. Hmm.
We suppress the feminine
Yeah.
because we want to suppress and almost reject and
Yeah.
avoid our own death rather than welcoming it and integrating it as part of our experience.
Yes. And our and their failure to have sustaining rituals that can move people through
Yes.
a grieving and normalize a grieving process, which must
Yeah.
accompany death. And we're
Yes.
not just the big death of our mortal lives, but the thousands of smaller but no less significant deaths that
Exactly.
we have to go through in life in order to move, in order to grow, in order to heal.
Exactly. Exactly. And I sort of interpret kind of like maybe what we're seeing in the social landscape currently of our political landscape too, of the discourse of
Oh yeah.
like literally dudes say wanting to repeal the 19th and that women shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Yeah.
Like all of these wanting to return,
Mhm.
revoke rights of women,
Right.
suppress them, um, ignore the power of the feminine, um,
Not just ignore it, but destroy it. It's almost
destroy
like
it. Yes.
yes.
Yes. I mean, it's almost kind of like back to the first episode where you and I were talking about the snakes and the dragons and the serpents
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
we had learned to try and reject and destroy and fear and control,
Right.
like to try and control. And
Yeah.
that's essentially what we do when we're invested in our own, survival and security and stability, where things have to stay the same, where
Yeah.
we feel like they have to stay the same for us to be safe.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah,
And these stories that we create for ourselves that we're owed a certain, I don't know, whatever it is that we're working for, that we're working towards, that we're trying to establish for ourselves. And of course, you know, that's all being done with the ego and relies on things essentially staying the same. Because these are
right.
the rules that I've learned to play by. I play by the rules. I'm supposed to get my due. And the
Yes.
rules were never supposed to change.
Right.
And what was underlying the rules is never supposed to change. And when
Yes.
it did, now it's this bitter betrayal. And then now I have
Yeah.
to go to war
Right.
with
Right.
life.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh. And there's such real deep tension with that.
Absolutely.
Where
Absolutely.
it's, yeah, coming to terms with that this whole imagination or this fairy tale or this belief that, like you said, the rules were going to keep us safe. The
Right.
rules were going to give us a good life.
Mhm.
The rules that we deferred to, that we were socialized into, that we were told
Yes. Right.
we're going to keep us safe, whether that's, following 10 Commandments or whether that's the implicit narratives about who men are supposed to be and who women are supposed to be. And then you learn to follow those narratives and those rules
Yeah.
because you're told that you're gonna have value when you do follow those scripts.
Mhm.
Like then you suddenly realize, oh no, that didn't keep me safe, actually. That actually led me into a pit of vipers.
Yes.
That led me to damage and destruction by following those rules, actually, because I couldn't attend to my own bodying the reality of what was going on around me, and the power dynamics and the shadows
Yes.
that were happening. And um, so yeah, like the following the rules, and kind of the rules are a product of the institutional
Absolutely.
stability, need for security. And
Mhm.
another example of this is a few years ago. So okay, so you and I, we grew up in a tradition with the belief that God never changes, has always been the same.
Yes.
There's always been one God, and it's,
Yep.
any belief in other gods were just idols and misguided beliefs.
Right.
Um, and the texts in the Bible, uh, they they were informed by God and breathed by God, and so therefore, um, any sort of incongruence about God in these stories, people
Right.
kind of do these mental gymnastics to explain and
Mhm.
justify why there's a shift, rather than say, it's because people's conceptions of God changed. And we're talking about a certain people, and we're talking about a certain
Yeah.
author and a certain audience, and they're from a multitude of different places and times, and these ideas were about how they saw it, about how they saw divinity and what they were reckoning with. And so those like, gray areas, or those contradictions, were because the people were different.
Yeah.
And people were learning and changing and moving. And so when I
Total
first,
denial of the living story, which is the story that is meant to grow and change and evolve over time, right?
yes, and
No.
there's wisdom in all of it.
There's wisdom in all of it, and you see some of that in the Jewish tradition, right? Coming out in the Midrash,
Yes,
which unfortunately is not, we don't have anything like that in modern day Christianity, as far as I
right.
know. Certainly not in the tradition that you and I grew up in at
Certainly
all,
not.
right? The story has to stay the same forever and ever. It's that unyielding sameness that never changes that we were taught is the safety that we must appeal to.
Yes. Yes. Because having things the same gives people a sense of security.
That's right.
And
Hmm.
they can then reject and revoke
Right.
the dragon, the serpent, the thing that moves and changes and rebirths and regenerates.
Hmm.
And the threat
Yep.
of, like, it threatens people's very identities and
Yeah.
existence to even think that
Yeah.
that things change, and that even, people's
Yeah.
idea of God changes.
Right. Yeah. It's funny, between sessions, I happen to come across a Jung meme. Now, I'm always careful with this because I've never actually read this, and I don't know if it can be directly attributed to Jung or not. Right? People
Right.
make
People
memes
make
all
up
the
stuff.
time,
Yeah.
right? But nevertheless, it spoke some wisdom into the conversation, which is the quote itself was, and I'm paraphrasing here. It's for human beings. It's not. It's between trying to make sense and nonsense, not right or wrong, or not good or bad. Right. We
Mm-hmm.
then attribute those terms, right and wrong, good and bad, to how we're trying to make sense or navigate nonsense.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. It's so easy to want to categorize things as good and evil,
Yeah. And we
as
do
right
that
or
for
wrong.
security. We do that for something to hold on to. I need to know who I am in this moment, and I need to know what the rules are,
Yes.
right?
And the extent to which I am within those rules.
Right. Yes.
That gives people a sense of security, rather than kind of the truth of the reality being the security.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. And so we can easily see how snakes and serpents become, and dragons over time become images of the enemy, become images of the demonic, the devil, the satanic, right? That just gets glorified. It seems like you at least with modern day Christian movements, they don't know how to make sense of the world without someone or something that is attacking them, that they
Yes.
need to go to war with or defend themselves against. That's written into the code, right?
Yes.
I am as somebody who needs to be at war with the enemy, in addition to loving God, which, we think we know what that means, but we really don't. It's easier for us to make sense out of what we need to go to war with.
Yes. Because like when we can think of ourselves as
Yeah.
at war with something, we can feel a sense of I don't of there's a binary sort of like if I can determine who I'm not,
Right.
then
Yeah.
that allows me to determine who I am. But what we're really doing is like letting the ego
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of dictate how we see ourselves, and we think we're cutting off parts of ourselves as if they're not ourselves,
Yes.
but
Yes.
we're putting them back in underground and into the ocean only for
Oh,
them
yeah.
to like
Yeah.
grow and say, oh wait, no, actually, this is you.
Dragons. Yes.
Yeah.
I sometimes think that the modern day fundamentalist Christian movements, the book of the Bible that they've ever read or even know anything about is the book of Revelation.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only book that seems to matter, because
Right.
that's the book where we're at war. And now we've
Right.
got the Jesus of war, which is in direct contrast to the Jesus of the Gospels. The two different figures, but we know which one we like. And it's the
Right.
one that's charging ahead and is going to vanquish our enemies.
Yes. Yes. Right. And if you can convince people to focus on an afterlife,
Yes.
put their attention on something that we actually don't know,
Yeah.
the unknown, but convince people they can know what it's going to be and just focus on that as if
Yes.
the experiences now in the present don't matter. Don't worry. Just say the
Right.
magic prayer and you'll be fine. You'll live forever. Then we
To say
can,
that we don't belong here, we belong in that imagined heavenly afterlife, that's our true home.
right. And so when you can convince people with that, you can control them.
Absolutely.
Because what you've done is you create this warped sense of reality that, oh, what's going on right here doesn't matter. You just think about later after you die. Your oppression right now doesn't matter because you will inherit the kingdom of God, and you will have a jewel in your crown for all the suffering that you're experiencing. And so we don't have to really address that right now.
Well,
We
and
just
that suffering, that becomes a badge of honor. That becomes
yes,
um, a what's the word I'm looking for? Like a value or something that we appeal to. Like the more we suffer, the holier we are.
oh my
Right?
gosh, right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. The glorification of
Right.
suffering. And but it's like a cop out,
Absolutely, it is.
right? It's
Yeah.
this warped sense of reality that you don't have to attend to what's going on in front of you,
Yeah.
right? Like it creates just this upside down world
Yeah.
where
Mhm.
people live in, and that upside down world, it
Yeah.
is the perfect condition to control them.
Exactly. Right. One of the things that I so appreciate about another friend of mine by the name of Mary DeYoung, and she does eco theology and
Yes.
ecology, and she's very adamant about, we need to come back to the true story of us as
Yes.
people who belong to the earth. We are people of the earth. We belong here. And
Yes.
in native tradition, all the native traditions, the earth is our mother.
Right.
How we walk upon our mother is supposed to inform us of who we are and what we're here to do.
Yes.
It's the mother. It's the earth. That's where we belong.
The material.
The material, the matter.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And so you're right. If we can get people to reject that, We can control them. And then, I mean, this could be like the source of 4 or 5 more episodes, but you know, you see how people take that idea that we are here to tame the earth and subjugate it. Therefore, we have rights to do whatever the hell we want with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
We create the doctrine of discovery and manifest destiny and all of the horrid misery that has
Yes.
been perpetrated upon the earth and upon the people and the animals of
Yeah.
the earth underneath those kinds of thinking that were cast as being holy in God's will and of the light, and we're doing God's work.
Yes. And the notion that the flesh is sin
Exactly. Yes,
perpetuates this.
absolutely.
As
It
if
does.
the material, the flesh, the body
Right.
is to be denigrated or to be devalued, at least in how we understand sin or how sin gets talked about as this bad thing,
Right.
right? This
Yeah.
willful disobedience, whatever. Um, when you can degrade the material, you degrade the earth, you degrade the mother, you degrade the feminine.
Well, and ultimately, you're degrading yourself.
Yourself, right?
As a man, I'm always really careful about bringing this up because when we think about the patriarchy, okay, by far, those who have suffered under the patriarchy are women. And anybody I would include who's not does not fit the cis het.
Yes. Gender
Perfect.
nonconforming,
Exactly.
non-binary, transgender.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, that is so overwhelmingly obvious. But there is this element that you, as a participant of that, and even somebody who is successfully using that to attain power, to do whatever the hell you want, okay, it is an injury to you. We
Yes.
are injuring ourselves on some level, right?
Absolutely.
And this makes me think about, the old fairy tale that was the original name of it. We've called it Sleeping Beauty now, but the name before, and to kick myself after this for not remembering it. I actually wrote about it in the book. But the idea of the story there was not the Disney version,
Right.
right?
Right.
The idea was that because she is a symbol of the divine feminine is asleep.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
kingdom is falling apart.
Right.
It is not sustainable because the element of that feminine has been removed. And the prince who comes to wake her up with a kiss is not there to save her.
Mm.
He's there to have her wake up so he and the rest of the kingdom can be saved.
Be saved. Right.
Um, and so, you know, and I think it is important, particularly for cishet men, to be able to have some stories that they can connect to that teach them that.
Yes.
You might feel like you're winning, quote unquote, okay?
Yeah.
But if we don't have stories to connect with how you are, in addition to damaging the earth, damaging other people, also damaging your soul at the same time, and turning, I mean, into a hollow shell. I mean, without having to name names, I would say the epic representative of that is the guy that's currently running for president. By the time this episode airs, we will actually know.
We will know.
We will know this being recorded before we know the results of that.
Right.
But that is like the absurd extreme representation of that. There's no humanity left. There's no humus left. It's all been taken out. It's all gone.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely all gone. And the devastating piece is all the support that
Yeah.
he has and that ideology has.
Yeah.
I just today, I mean, there's so many, we could go on and on about examples, but I'll say just today I saw, so, I don't know this person very well and hadn't ever heard of him until recent years, but I think he's a well-known Christian figure, or at least on social media, Matt Walsh.
Oh, I'm familiar with this guy. Yes.
Okay, commenting on a recent speech given by Michelle Obama, sort of appealing to men and men's sort of conscience, to say, could you please be better about protecting our lives?
Yeah.
And she listed just a number of ways that, the women in their lives and just women are really at death. We're dying because of the policies, the policies that are about our healthcare and about our reproductive rights. And essentially she was saying, can you think of that? Can you think of our lives when you go to the voting polls? And I'm very much paraphrasing and maybe imposing a bit of my own interpretation onto what she was saying, but Matt Walsh called that misandry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The hate of men.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that has been the play there, is to say that anytime we hold somebody to account for their actions, anytime we ask somebody to take responsibility for their words,
yes,
and for what they do, is a form of hatred.
Yes. And so back to what you were saying about giving men stories that they can see themselves in.
Right.
This goes back to the fears of inadequacy.
Oh yeah.
Jealousy and the envy that the male form is actually biologically inferior. Yeah. And so we've constructed all these narratives and ways to try and make you say that men are stronger and in all these ways, and which are just really to suppress the power of the feminine. But if we could help men to see their wholeness, right, the ways that they embody the power of the feminine too, and the power of the masculine, and that these are energies, these are archetypes, these are parts of the human experience that we all have.
All have, yes.
Rather than just something that's purely only depending upon how your body is formed. But it's these are energies, these are things that we all experience, and there's the wholeness to it all. And if we could teach men to love themselves.
Oh God, please, yes.
That they don't, the male form that doesn't give life, you're enough.
Right.
You're enough. You don't have to start proving, the protector, provider, we're in charge, we have the power. As a compensation, an overcompensation for your fear of inadequacy.
Right. Well, and the failure of all of our institutions to walk men through that process. And of course, we're seeing the backlash of that is men are feeling robbed of their birthrights. Yes. I played by the rules. I did what you told me to. This is what you told me I was supposed to get out of it. Now, wait a minute. Women don't need us anymore. What the hell? Right. Right. And
yes, the male loneliness epidemic that gets talked about when actually women are report more instances of loneliness. But it's talked about as what are we going to do? People, how are you going to meet our needs? We're lonely. The men, that's the male narrative is kind of putting the responsibility on others to cater to their needs.
Right. Exactly.
It's actually quite weak.
Well, instead of having any faculty to take responsibility for where you're at right now,
Right.
and start doing the work, right? And of course, that's going to be shadow stuff, always shadow stuff.
Right.
And, if you can't learn how to accept loss and grieve the loss, then your only recourse is to go to war. And since we'll seemingly do anything to avoid having to feel that sense of vulnerability, I mean, grief itself is gets labeled as, that's a faux pas, that's a no-no, right? Men aren't supposed to cry, kind of a thing, which is absurd.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd. I cannot get over the extent to which we have detached men from their emotions
Right. Hmm.
and how, and I'm in academia, and so I see this a little bit even more pronounced that we think that we can just intellectualize our way through these issues.
No, no, because that's not in the humus. That's it there. It's in the head. It's all ego stuff. And our ego has a function. It does what it's supposed to do. But when we confuse the whole of ourselves with our ego and we can't see beyond that, oh boy, we
Right.
see we see everything that's happening in the world right now.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
So yeah, even just how for anybody of any gender, it's generally sort of looked down upon to like cry in public,
Right.
right? In these spaces, these professional spaces,
Right.
at least in academia. And I'm here to like buck that that
Right.
narrative.
Yeah.
Like I will happily commit that faux pas to
Mhm.
show my humanity and show
Yeah.
that I feel. And when we talk about being these institutions that are committed to equity and justice, and we're anti-oppressive and all of that, and yet we think that just thinking about it and studying it and talking about it is going to be enough without feeling trauma and oppression and like moving our bodies.
Exactly. Systematically removing the most important component of how we actually learn something
Right, right.
with experience, being in the earth of ourselves, right? It's
Yeah.
one thing to talk about things, it's another thing to experience them.
Yes. And to feel any kind of discomfort
Oh boy, yeah.
comes with it.
Right. Yeah. And we have no modern rituals or rites to normalize that or to walk people through it
No,
at all.
no. Right. We're really, really good at self-delusion
Yeah. Mhm.
and thinking that if we just kind of warp our perception
Right.
and convince ourselves that we're okay and
Mhm.
tell ourselves, oh, we'll see them in the afterlife when it
Right.
comes to grief,
Mhm.
or or just all the ways that we
Right.
cope with trauma through
Yeah.
self-delusion,
Mhm.
whether that's maybe taking blame that wasn't ours,
Yeah.
or convincing ourselves that it was actually a positive experience rather than a horrific,
Right.
oppressive one.
Yeah.
Like there's so many ways we warp reality in order to avoid the discomfort.
You avoid the discomfort. Yes. When I'm working with clients, I'm very, very careful when we talk about growth from wounds that the wound itself is not a gift.
Yes.
That's to deny it what it actually is, which is a wound. It's
Right.
something that hurts. It's something that breaks. It's something that tears apart. It's something that destroys.
Right.
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 And so, of course, I think back to some of my religious background where you had language around, such things being God's will so that something good could happen as a result, which
Right.
is a wonderfully harmful way of gaslighting people, um, and embedding trauma as a way of life.
Yes.
Um, but that the possibility for something new to occur and healing to or the ability just the ability to heal, right? you know often because we're working so hard to deny those things, right?
Mhm.
We don't choose to look into the darkness until we're thrown in there, or until we're forced to. I think
Yeah.
that's the story for most of us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So and so yes, it does break things open. It does give us the opportunity, but of course we know very well, okay, that even in an event like that, we can still choose to try to go back into denial and try to pretend that the life that blew up that no longer exists is still happening.
Right.
And people do it.
Oh my gosh. Yes, they do.
Yeah. Um, so, this is one of the things that I think that when we come around to our deconstruction series, which I'm excited to do with you again at some point, where we'll talk a little bit more specifically about our own experiences coming out of a religious background, one that you and I particularly shared.
Yes.
Uh, and that we ended up bonding over and becoming like really close friends later in life around those stories. Kind of seeing how, okay, now that everything's been broken open, now that nothing that everybody told me was true is true, okay,
Yep.
what do I do?
Right.
Right? What do I choose to look at? What do I choose to not look at? Right? what what do I choose myself to essentially allow myself to see that I was told that I shouldn't look at?
Right.
Just even looking at it was going to get me into trouble.
Right.
Right? Those kinds of things. So the patriarchy is a deep wound. It's a deep, abiding, thousands of year old wound
Yes.
that we're still trying to figure out how to move on from.
Right. Right. And it's most likely going to have to fail us collectively in a very large way
As
in
as,
order
as
to move
typically
on.
what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like you said, we often don't ask to be shoved into the into the darkness.
We
Just
don't
happen.
voluntarily do that.
And my
Typically.
sense is climate change will be one of the aspects that moves us into a reckoning with
Yeah,
our relationship to the material.
it will. And it is. Yeah. So Amy, in this last couple of minutes here, I want to thank you so, so much, my dear friend, for joining me on these 3 episodes. And I'm looking forward to more that we're going to be doing in the near future. Um, your insight, your wisdom, and your deep love are inspiring to me. I know they're inspiring to a lot of people. And I so appreciate the light that you yourself choose to bring first and foremost into your own world that then has the opportunity to radiate outward.
Thank you, friend.
Who you are, and I appreciate who you are. And
Thank you. And it's entirely mutual. And I would like to say this to the to the listeners that um, you were a pivotal point of my chaos that I had experienced that I alluded to in the first episode, of trying to make sense out of the chaos. And that's essentially where our friendship began, where you offered the advice to pay attention to my dreams.
that's right.
And so you're one of the midwives and one of the
Thank you.
compassionate witnesses of my
Absolutely.
story. And so thank you for being that divine masculine
Yes. You're
piece
welcome,
for
my
me.
friend.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, the title of the story that I was struggling to remember in the conversation is called The Tale of Briar Rose. And that's just one of many different folk tales that have all kind of been sourced or gone into what became the Sleeping Beauty story that then became popularized by Walt Disney and the version that came out about that story. It's actually a really good example of watching how our cultural mores and values get poured into our stories as we tell them as we go along. And we can kind of look back and kind of track them and see where they've come from and where they're going. I think that what we've learned here is that the lure of the safety or the illusion of safety of these strict patriarchal misogynistic values that our human species has been carrying for such a long time are very, very powerful in the imagination of a lot of us. And without appropriate stories that we can learn to tell that encourage us and give us permission to move forward, to move out of old stories that don't work for us anymore and into newer, more fulfilling stories that are actually getting us better, more fully and deeply in touch with our very souls, that can be restorative and healing. This conversation that I've been having with my good friend Dr. Amy Ferrell is important, I believe, towards that end. I hope the rest of you are grappling with this in some way, in addition to just being curious about your own ongoing stories, your own ongoing myths, and where the spirit or the soul of your own lives are wanting to take you. So again, be curious, take good care of yourselves. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.